Welcome again to my senior mastery. This link goes to the presentation as well. My name is Gianna Monfante. My title is Development of Storytelling and Character Design, and today is April 23rd in the art room. To define my mastery was to make the character sheets and create the relationships and help future market myself. The objective of my mastery was to learn research and improve my vocabulary, as well as grow in my craft.
Oh my God.
My three influential artists were Hayao Miyazaki, Elisabetta Serrani, and Bertoldo Montagna. Hayao Miyazaki created his own brand with 51 animated films. His brand is Studio Ghibli, as you see in Ponyo, and he created it through animation for himself through folklore elements. Next is Elisabetta Serrani, and I was influenced by her art because of how she painted her faces, as well as some chiaroscuro in the background, which I'll talk about as with my other artist as well. He also had it, and he influenced me through his interior and exterior design. Some of the things I have learned through the annotated bibliographies were drawing and painting. When you draw, you have a light sketch, and then you have a cleaner sketch on top of it when you're sketching. But you can also use digital through Procreate, and I use that through projection to have some of my canvases. The next one was brushes and techniques, which you can have a multitude of brushes. There's a wash brush, a line brush, and a round brush, which were my main three brushes I had used. I use the round and the line brush because they allow details, like the small details on this canvas with all the flowers, but a wash brush is nice when you do an underpainting. When you have an underpainting, you take any color, but it affects the color on top of it, which is a part of color theory. And with one of my pieces, I did a purple underpainting, and with that one, I used some blues and some greens. And on the Ferris wheel one, I used a brown underpainting, and with this one, I used a green underpainting. So I kind of worked with the colors I was going to use on top of the piece. And there's the page flips. You can use alla prima, which is wet on wet when you're doing more of your painting on top. When you use water, it lightens the opacity and the pigment of the paint, but you can also use a thickener to help thicken the paint, but I did not use a thickener in my time here. When you're painting, you want to know where the light source is, like a light from a light or a window, and it affects how the shadow will post on top of. With that also has to do with chiaroscuro, which is when you have a darker background, and then it helps focus on the thing in front of it, or the person in front of it. Next is color theory, and I really had to learn this one because I had to relearn the basics, because as an artist, even though I've been doing art for so long, you have to relearn the basics over and over again to recap them in your brain. When you have colors, they affect each other, and you can even do a piece with a whole bunch of greens, but they can look like another color at times, and it depends on the brain because of prisms going into your brain. And there's primary and secondary colors. The primary colors make up the secondary colors. And there's different things like value, which is a range of dark to light with your shades, which I did a piece on in my mastery. And when you have a color, you can have a very saturated color. This one's about comic building, which I did some comic building as this is all for a comic, but it's before through the character design and the storytelling of the comic. When you are writing a story in English class, you learn about the inciting incident, climax, and falling resolution part. So you have to know when you're writing what's going to happen when, and be very precise when you're writing and making a mastery. And in a story, there's relationships and backstories, and I talk about my characters' backstories through the pieces I have made. These were all the techniques I had talked about earlier, and some materials I had used, as well as connections I had made through my time in the art major. Next, I'm going to start talking about my breathworks. This first one is value study, and I framed it up here. I wanted to work with value as well as a little bit of realism to help understand further when you're making a comic or in your own style, you have to start with the basics. And that was my main focus. This is some of the juniors from the art room. And as well as I had a print I made last year. When you have a print, I used a linoleum block, and then you take a sketch, which is up there as well, and you sketch it out, and I used my iPad, and then you put graphite on to help transfer it onto the linoleum block, and then you carve it out with I used a carved ball to help get what you want. There's a lot of backwards thinking, so it's difficult, and you have to research and do it a few times, as I did, to understand it better. And this one got in the Rose Haven last year, and I was very proud of it. The next piece is one I did of myself working with sustained investigation, which we learned through AP, in having things go together in the way of a story. And this was building off of a piece I had made one of my first times working with portraiture, and I wanted to see how much I'd grown, and I did another portrait of myself. With this one, I really worked with the foreground and some realism aspects once again to start off my mastery. As well as it went with these two pieces I had created, and they're up here as well framed. My mom and dad took these photos, and I ended up drawing myself to put into my CC portfolio. And so the one on the left is more simplistic, while the other one is a lot more detailed to show my range and how I can draw. This next piece was the first part of my mastery, and it goes with these two paintings up here of the houses, but this was the digital version of them, working with some line art and some exterior design. And then I did it again to redraw and show how I built my skill throughout the year, in having somewhat of some more realism aspects and less defined lines as the line art, and just using shading to help show lines like in the real world. The next one was Kierrigan's house, so I drew Ariella and Kierrigan's house, and then through sustained investigation I drew them again to show I can do it in multiple mediums. And I also drew Ariella's house, and I really enjoyed working with the lighting from the windows, as well as the trees in the background. If it loaded, you can see that I drew hers in different seasons, and that is because the story starts in the spring and then ends off in the fall, and that's what I worked with through about 4 seasons to show my mastery. And going back, I had some building development, which is more of the world building in my series, to show some 2-point perspective through the house, and more interior design. This part inside of the house is Ariella's room with her pet frog, and it talks about she loves frogs. That's one of the things that she loves. And then along with that, I worked on some exterior and interior design, showing Ariella's job. She works at a plant shop. And then across is, so her building would be up here, and then it's the same across from each other. His building is like a library bookstore that he works at, so he loves books. And next to that is a cafe. When you're working, you want to understand the world as you're drawing it, so knowing where everything is. Inside of Kierrigan's house I did a series of 3 drawings to show that I can work with more simplicity, but and line work is a big thing, a part of this piece, but I can also work more detailed, showing my variety. And I really loved all the details I did in this one. So this is an apartment building where her boss lives, and the boss owns the building pretty much, so she lives there as well. And as apartments do, they use a very similar color palette as well as similar flooring, and so I worked with those elements as well. And my favorite part was drawing the little flower vase on the right and the right. And then next on to finally showing my characters, that was the world building, and now this is some character development I had made. So Ariella and Kirigan are already, you can maybe see that they're the main characters, and I worked with them the most. They are friends, and then they end up dating, but Kirigan's cousin, Dimitri, so they're related, and that's how they know each other. And then August has been Ariel's best friend since they were 5 years old. And then she's friends with TJ, as well as Kirigan's friends with TJ, so that's how they meet. And so that goes there. And then Evangeline is friends with Eli, and Eli works with Kirigan at the bookstore. And then Stella ends up moving to the town and becoming close friends with Evangeline as well as Kirigan as well. And so that's how they all meet, and they end up sitting together at lunch. And this is them all together. So I built the character design to show another piece of them all together as well. Working with portraiture. And this is some more portraiture showing different angles of their faces, such as a front view, a side view, a quarter view as well. And the building process of that is you start with a sketch, and then you draw it again, and then you can have the no line art look of using shadows to have the faces, and then as well as them together. Next, I also did Stella as another character, showing a different way with no color behind, as well as a different kind of character sheet I could make as well. Next is Ariella portraits. These are in her house, and it's showing the development of age because children age so much in their first 6 years. And with that's I'm focused on the age development. And in my notebook, I talked about what happened with each of these pieces together. Next is character development. I worked a little bit more showing the characters as well as some relationship and emotion. With this, it's showing how they met and then how they develop to when they ask each other out. And with that one, they bump into each other in the hallway, and then they think, oh, I won't see them again. But then they see each other in the middle again at the coffee shop and end up realizing, oh, I know your cousin. And so they end up seeing each other more after that. And then on the left is Ariella and her boss, and on the right is a sketch drawing I did for another piece with Evangeline in a different dress. With those, I worked with portraiture as well, and with these as well. I also wanted to show some more seasonal at the end of the story I'm trying to show in the story with different holidays. Next is when we started AP, we had to think. I had to think of some character aspects, and Stella loves writing. That's one of her things that she loves, so I wanted to put that into a piece. As well as with this, I worked with purple underpainting or red underpainting to help pop the purple in the background. And purple's her favorite color, so it's all over her room. And this is more in the summer when she first moved there in her new room. And I also worked with a foreshortened perspective by bringing the shoes closer to the edge of the canvas and bringing them closer. Next is the piece I had drawn with Evangeline in her pink dress. This built up to this piece with the pink and blue dress. They're together at prom, which you'll see more of in my concentration pieces. With this, I also worked on the curtains in the front and some interior design and some more poses as well. And this is another sustained investigation of a different medium to have shown the piece. Next is finally my concentration pieces. This is birthday. Some backstory of Stella is when she moved, right before she moved, she had her birthday. And she's taking one last look around the room to take it in and say goodbye. And this was the first piece I had made in junior year working with portraiture. With this, I had redefined it this year so it could fit into my AP and mastery better. I used some chiaroscuro to have the darker background help focus on her more than the redder background did. And I also only used 2 colors in the balloons to help focus on her as well. The pier was a part of a digital piece I had made for Ariella's birthday. She and Kiergan went to the beach, and so I put these 2 pieces together as well as thinking of the airport competition. So I used some aspects of Myrtle Beach. The Ferris wheel is meant to be like the sky wheel, and the puffy clouds with the bright colors like Myrtle Beach. With this one, I worked on some exterior design and some color, as well as I sketched it out and I projected it onto the piece, and I had it digital as well. You can see that I had changed it originally from this nice blue and light blue on the boardwalk to have it just be the blue with the seagulls. And this piece is a part of it when they're at the beach. She has a little bird fly onto her finger. And with this one, I worked with the pose as well as the background being like a sunset sky, a different time of day than other of my pieces. And this one was accepted to be voted for the Myrtle Beach competition. Next is my first animation I had ever done. There is a lot of layers, over 60 frames, drawn up of a background and a foreground where she's running. And with this, you have to work with consistency of panel, and I'll show it to you now. The story behind this one is kind of when you're in a dream, you're running for no reason, and then you just wake up. From this one, I learned that I wanted to have more movement in a dress and in a hair, so I did another one where she's looking for August, who disappeared at the prom, and she wanted to take photos of her. And so I worked and researched more ways to be consistent in the movement throughout the frames. And there's 2 videos. So I also worked with a different type of background movement, having it be the same, and then the doors open with her movement as well. Next is In the Garden, which is my personal favorite piece, and it took the longest working on it all the way back to November last year, starting with the underpainting and then building up the details, having them be very not streaky on the bottom, building up to some details in the columns as well as above the columns, creating my own top part and redesigning that as well. I put my name in the top squiggles, if you want to look at that later. In the blue, I had some balconies, which you'll see in a different part, but then I went over it again with the blue because I didn't like them, and then I repainted some later, and I added the little painting at the bottom, as well as all these flowers. My big focus was on the architecture of the piece, and I used Alla Prima in the piece. My next piece is a moment which goes along with that piece. So when you walk into the prom, you'd see that, and from that, you'd see that, which is why they are where they are. With that, I had done the flowers before I did those flowers, so it helped me understand how to create those flowers more smaller details. With that one, I worked with the background and the foreground of the character, drawing her dress with digitally first, as well as its... I did it digitally, and I had redrawn it as well on her to have some sustained investigation, as well as for my CC portfolio. And I had more details in the flowers on her head, but working with those 2 together. Next is another piece showing her dress as well, and she's dancing with Kiergan at the prom. Working with the same background once again, And so same investigation, they all go together, and showing the relationship of the characters. Next is August, which got into Artfield's last year. She was the second piece I had done in junior year with, I worked with the emotion, and to explain it, this flame is the same that's in the background, so it's not just a different one, it's the same one. And I used chiaroscuro to help focus on the character in front. And I also worked with the pose. And I redid the background and some of the flame elements this year through AT. Next is going with that circle piece. They go together. This is the digital version of it, and I worked with the stylized clothing, doing the same dress once again, so they all go together through sustained investigation, working with the pose and the relationship of these two characters. And I also enjoyed the chandelier I had drawn digitally. Next is the circle piece. I had done a different something on the other side, but I didn't like that it wasn't sanded, so I worked with sanding that, and it helps so much more have the paint stick better and be more flat. Next is my last piece I had created in the art major, and it's showing all the characters together once again, and showing the relationships and how close August and Ariella are, and just showing them having a great time during the summer. Next were all the competitions we applied to in the art major, and I had the privilege of being a part of 7 of those competitions. My favorite art competition was Artfield that we had gone to, and the town is so pretty. If you haven't been there, it's like City. And also, Burrs and Chapin felt very special because it's in an art museum, and I felt very privileged to be a part of that last year. And I'm very thankful for all of the competitions we were part of. These were the 2 chalk day pieces I had made with Sunday. I collaborated both years. Some of the things we do in the art major are we have 21st century skills, and I had collaboration, creativity, innovation, and some few more that I talked about in my notebook. And moving on to my advice to juniors is don't procrastinate, which is so funny because even I procrastinated. But what you can do to not procrastinate is think of things ahead of time and use your summer wisely, as well as taking a break, but also sketching out your 24 products you want to make. And avoid burnout by taking those breaks as well, but also focusing. Just focus. And make sure to research whatever you want to make, and make your research and your bibliographies very, very specific to what you want to do. And your mastery can be made up of way more than 24 works, but organization of those 24 pieces is important, and knowing what you're going to do is important. But make the most out of your senior year. Community. I have a very great community here, and I'm very thankful for the community I have made and the friends I have made and all my teachers. And the honor societies, such as National Honor Society, I never thought I'd have the chance to be a part of it, but I'm very thankful, as well as being the president for International Thespian Society and being secretary for our student council, as well as the Art Honor Society. And it's all been very much to me. When I was part of many clubs here, spending over 40 hours each year giving back through volunteer hours, and I was very thankful for everything. I would have never found Coastal as my future plan for art and theater if it wasn't for Miss Penn taking us to Radium Girls, and I also saw Greenbird and Cabaret, and they are so wonderful and talented at Coastal. I cannot wait to be a part of it, as well as going for an art exhibition in the fall to see Coastal further, and I'm very excited. And thank you for attending my senior mastery. I am I can bring up the link again if you want to see my website, but that is all. And to introduce my panel members, I have Ms. Franklin, who helped me this year, and for 3 semesters with AP, the art major, everything, she's always inspired me. And Ms. Compton helped bring us to the art major and understand the fundamentals of all the arts. We had wonderful lessons in the beginning of junior year. And Ms. Burgess always made English class so fun. I am not an English person, but she made it so fun, and I worked with her in student council. And Ms. Penn, I love Ms. Penn. I love theater so much, and I'm so happy to do it in Coastal. I love theater. And she does everything just so much. And Miss Cerrone made Spanish fun as well. Classes were just fun. And I really helped me learn speaking to do it in Spanish too as well. And it was just such a great time at the academy. Any questions?
Well, bravo.